Okay, so thank you all for your patience as we get started today. I am Jill Spear. I am on the Early Career Professional Development Committee with the Botanical Society of America. And today we have representatives from NSF to talk about the Graduate Research Fellowship Program. So they will be giving their presentation. And at the end of that, we will have time for Q&A. So I just ask that everybody keep themselves muted to listen and not distract from who's speaking today. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and those will be read and answered during our Q&A session. Thank you so much. And I pass it over to NSF now.
Good morning. I'm Rochelle Craven. I'm a program analyst in the Graduate Research Fellowship Program. And I'll let my colleague Joe Schildback introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Joel Schildback. I'm a program director with the Graduate Research Fellowship Program, and I am what's known as a rotator or an IPA. I am on leave from my regular role as a faculty member at Johns Hopkins to work here at NSF on the Graduate Research Fellowship Program. So thanks for joining us.
I am Annie Lemming. I'm the NSF GRFP Operations Center Outreach Manager. Thank you for having us today. And I'm going to yield the floor to Rochelle, as it sounds like she's going to start us off on our presentation. As always, Rochelle and Dr. Schildback, please tell me when to advance to the next slide. Okay, I'm going to turn myself off here. Thank you.
Yes, you can advance to the next slide. Again, we'd like to welcome you to the Graduate Research Fellowship Program, GRFP program presentation. Here are some introductory websites and email addresses. If you have any questions or you have any inquiries about the program and you'd like to review our sites, here are a list of website links and email addresses that you can reference. Next slide, please. Today, we'll go over several prompts regarding the program. We'll go over general information, a description of the program, eligibilities for the program, and we'll also go over ineligibility degree programs. We'll go over ineligibility areas and studies and proposal research. We'll go over the application process, and we'll also go over the review criteria. Next slide, please. The overall goal of the graduate research program is to recruit individuals in the area of STEM and STEM fields, to select, recognize, and financially support early career individuals with whom demonstrate potential and high achieving science and engineers. We also want to broaden participation of a full spectrum of diverse talent in society that has offers and includes underrepresented and underserved communities. Next slide, please. About the NSF GRFP. GRFP has been around since 1952, which is the start of the National Science Foundation. We have awarded over 70,000 fellows. During this fellowship, you will notice that fellows receive an annual stipend of $37,000 and a cost of education allowance of $16,000. This is expected to grow in the near future, but it all depends on funding from our congressional members. The fellowship program is a 5-year period, which 3 years of that period is due for financial support. Early major fields of study also include chemistry, computer and information science, engineering, geoscience, life sciences, materials, research, mathematical sciences, physical and astronomical sciences, psychology, social sciences, STEM education, and learning research. Submitting early open to individuals pursuing research-based master's and doctoral degrees in eligible fields of science, which I've just gone over. Next slide, please. Here's a more detailed description of the GRFP program. 5-year awards are totaling $159,000, for each year being $53,000 for 3 years of financial support. Each year would be a $37,000 stipend, which would include a $16,000 cost of education stipend. Payment covers all tuition and mandatory fees, which would include no cost to the student. Other NSF opportunities include internships, which are non-academic intern programs, FACE, individuals with disability support, and career life balance initiatives, which are considered family leave. Next slide, please. More benefits of the GRFP program include fellowships, which is the award to individuals paid through the graduate institution. Flexibility, which is choice of project, advisor, and graduate program. Unrestricted non-service requirements after completion, which means you have no obligation to the GRFP program after the completion of your fellowship. And portable, can be used at any accredited nonprofit U.S. institution of higher learning, with campuses in the U.S. research-based master's and doctoral programs. Next slide, please. We will move on to the Graduate Research Fellowship Program eligibilities. Next slide, please. Here are some of the eligibilities for the program. You must be a U.S. citizen, national, or permanent resident. You also must be at your early career, undergrad, or a graduate student, pursuing research-based master's and/or doctorate degrees, which are non-professional degrees. It must be in the area of STEM or STEM education, and you must be fully enrolled full-time in a graduate degree program at an accredited nonprofit U.S. institution or of higher learning. And it must not be at a foreign institution. And here are some other eligibilities. You must only apply once. Level 1 senior bachelor's degree, no graduate study. Level 2 first year graduate student, which can include joint bachelor's and master's completed in 3 years. Level 3 second year graduate students with no more than 1 academic year completed in your first graduate degree program. For your joint-based bachelor's and master's holders only can apply as a first-year doctoral student, progress to PhD directly after completing your joint bachelor's and master's degree. 4th level, returning graduate students, 2-year interruption in graduate degree, no doctoral degree, first academic year in graduate program, not enrolled in graduate program at application deadline. Next slide, please. Ineligible degree programs. We'll move into the ineligible degree programs. Professional degrees must not include MBAs, MDs, JDs, DVMs, DBSs, and PharmDs, which are most mainly medical degree programs. Joint science professional degree programs, community global and public health, counseling, social work, education except STEM education, and humanities except history of science. See detailed eligibility requirements in the GRFP solicitation, which comes out annually. Next slide, please. Ineligible areas of study and proposed research are as follows. Research which is directly health related, which include animal models of science for drug, disease professional, public health, global health, clinical research, and patient-oriented research. Outcome research, health services, standard of care, health policy, research directly leading to clinical trials, advocacy for special policies, and applied research on plant pathology. Also, impacts on food safety. Next slide, please. And my colleague Joel Schildback will take over here.
Thanks, Rochelle. Jonas just dropped in a link to the solicitation. So for those of you who may not know, the solicitation is an announcement of the program. It's a public document that's put out by NSF and describes the program, and it's sort of the rules of the road. It includes everything that you need to know about, well, many things. I wouldn't say everything, but many things about applying, including, mundane details, but details that are essential, like the fonts that you're allowed to use, the margins, but it also extends to, as Rochelle described, eligible areas of research, things of that nature. So it's always great to take a look at that and become familiar with it, read it closely so you understand. Okay. Now moving on to the application package. Next slide. Because of course, this is the guts of it. So the application, as you might expect, has several parts. And the first of these you're going to see, so if you haven't already, you would go to, for example, our website, nsfgrfp.org, and found the link that takes you to the application portal within research.gov. You would go into research.gov, you would create your login if you haven't already. And then just about the first thing that would greet you as you start the application is this form wherein you would put your personal information, your name, your birth date, education, things of that nature. Okay, so it's a form like you've seen dozens of times every time you've applied for something. Okay, so that's kind of the easy thing. Then we also require 2 statements. One of them is the personal relevant background and future goal statement. I'll refer to that from here on as the personal statement. And then there's the graduate research statement. Then those are complemented by transcripts and then letters of reference. And we'll talk a bit more in more detail about all of these things. And next slide. So just to give you an indication, the deadlines are coming up fast. For life sciences, and I'm guessing most people here would be applying under some subfield in the life sciences, that would be 5 p.m. local time of your mailing address on October 16th. Okay, so it's not so far away. Now, as mentioned, you go to the solicitation, and if you can't seem to find the right link, just simply go to your favorite search engine and drop in NSF GRFP solicitation. And for this year, if you're applying, you want to make sure that you're looking at the one that starts with a 24. So they all have a number. You're looking for one that starts with a 24 to make sure you're dealing with this year. Now, if you haven't already, it may in fact be too late, but if for whatever reason you need accessibility accommodations, please get in a request via email to info@nsfgrfp.org outlining what those accommodations are. That should have been in 4 weeks before the application deadline, so you would be on borrowed time at the moment. Okay, next slide. Now, before we get into the application, let's give you sort of the timeline, the overview here. And this is really important. If you've not started the application yet, you need to get in there immediately. And one of the things you need to do is get in the request for the letters. So there's a place in the application where you list the names and the email addresses of those who have agreed to write you a letter of reference. And you want to get that stuff entered and get the requests out immediately, because those are actually due before the due date for the application. They're due 5 p.m. Eastern time on October 11th. Okay, this is a change from previous years, so best to make sure that everybody understands that. Okay, so letters are due October 11. Your application would be due the following week. And I know we've got folks here who are undergrads or are postbacks and are thinking about applying here, you want to make sure if you get that application in to get in your applications to graduate schools, because one of the conditions of applying or accepting the fellowship is that the next round would be offered in early 2025. One of the conditions is that you're actually enrolled in a graduate program, an acceptable and eligible graduate program in the fall of 2025. Okay. So as I mentioned, fellowship offers are going to go out in 2025, late March, early April. Those who get an offer have a few weeks to decide whether or not they're going to accept. And then in the fall, the fellowship year begins. Next slide. Okay, the two statements. Next slide. So the first of these that we'll talk about, this is the personal statement. And you have 3 pages. And here's your opportunity to tell your story. And realize that what the reviewers are going to be looking for is your potential as a STEM researcher. So you want to tell them, you want to describe your experiences, both professional and personal, that have given you the drive, that have provided the motivation and the preparation for this next step that you want to take. So you could talk about your career aspirations, your goals, how your experiences have shaped your goals, and then, any research, industrial, professional experience. And you'll want to describe what the project was, what your role was, and, things like, how did you get involved? It's always important to point out why a project is worth doing, because of course, doing a boring project, it takes just as much time as doing a great project. And so why would you want to spend your time doing this project? It's good to be explicit about what your contribution to the project was, and especially how did it fit into the whole. So as you get more and more experience, it becomes potentially anyway, it becomes easier for you to see how your smaller contribution fits into the whole and to describe that. So that's one of the things that the reviewer is going to be looking for. Now, it's important to understand that for this personal statement and for the research statements, within them both, you need to have sections that address the merit review criteria. So you're going to need to have in each of these one section with a header and text underneath, of course. The header reads intellectual merit. And then a separate section with the header broader impacts with, of course, text underneath that. So this is one of those things that's written into the solicitation. So you need to make absolutely sure that you have these in there. The application you send in, these statements will be scanned for them. And if they're not there, because your application is not complying with the solicitation, it would be returned without review. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so the research statement. Now, this is a little bit shorter. It's 2 pages as opposed to 3. And realize that this is not the research proposal that perhaps you think about if you're talking about applying to a federal agency for funding, okay? This is not some sort of contract that you're entering into and you're saying, oh, if you give me the funding, I will do these experiments. It's not the situation. Instead, it is a way for applicants to kind of show off their training. So what's the evidence that you can select an interesting research project? You know, here's a good research question. This is why it's important and interesting. And this is how I would approach it. So it allows you to communicate your research idea and your approaches, demonstrate that you have some familiarity with how to set up experiments and how to select appropriate methods, and then set it up in such a way that you're actually likely to learn something. And then you would throw in something about future directions. You know, what would you do next? When you do this, and as you write it, it's important to keep a few things in mind. So this is basic scientific communication. You want to avoid jargon. You want to avoid acronyms, unless you, of course, clearly explain what they are. You want to make your contributions clear. You know, how did this idea come to you? And, you know, what would you be doing here? And then you want to communicate clearly for non-specialists. And to clarify that, just please realize that our reviewers aren't just some random people that, you know, were walking by the NSF headquarters and we got them to review. They actually are experts, and they're going to be experts in the, you know, field that your application was written in. However, they may not be have deep expertise in what you're writing on. So they are capable of understanding the project, but they may not be familiar with all the details. And so you don't want to immediately jump in and not identify acronyms, not explain things, because you can confuse reviewers that way. And the last thing you want to do is confuse a reviewer, because a confused reviewer is not a happy reviewer and is not somebody who's going to score your application highly. So just keep that in mind. And it's always good to pass these things around. If you've got friends who are applying, you know, everybody read each other's applications to make sure that these statements are clear and understandable, and you're not losing people along the way. And like with a personal statement, you need those 2 sections, one addressing intellectual merit and the other broader impacts. Next slide. Then reference letters. in order for you to send out that request for reference letters, which again, you should be doing very soon if you haven't already, you need to submit at least 3 names. And in order for your application to move ahead to review, there must be at least 2 reference letters submitted. So because of that, and because the stakes are so high, we strongly recommend that you identify 5 people, if you can, who can serve as reference writers, and you list them. And if more than 3 come in, then 3 of those letters will be pulled into the application. So the way you steer that whole process is that when you go in and you list the reference writers, you list them in order of those that you think are going to provide the greatest benefit to your application. So if you have someone who you've worked with extensively and can write a glowing letter that includes anecdotes and details about what what promise you have as a researcher, you want to list that person number 1. And then you tick down in order of importance. And if more than 3 letters come in, the system ticks down from the top and pulls in those that you've ranked the most highly. Okay. Now, transcripts. Each application is going to have a bare minimum of 1 transcript, and that would be from the university that the bachelor's degree is earned from. However, if you've attended more than 1 university as an undergraduate and at these institutions have been in a degree granting program, you're going to want to request transcripts from all of those institutions. In addition, if you're applying while you are a graduate student, you're going to need to also submit a transcript from the graduate institution. Now there may be, if you've just started, there may be effectively nothing on that transcript, but it does indicate that you are in fact enrolled in the institution. Okay. Next slide. Okay, the review criteria. Next slide. Now, as I mentioned, we have 2 merit review criteria. These are approved by the National Science Board that oversees the National Science Foundation. And all applications or research proposals that come in are assessed using these criteria. The first of these is intellectual merit, and that is defined with a question. So how important is the proposed activity to advancing knowledge within its own field or across different fields? And the second is broader impacts, or how well does the proposed activity benefit society or advance desired societal outcomes? Now, with a research proposal, the proposed activities, those are the experiments that are described. For a fellowship application, the proposed activity is funding the applicant's graduate education. So it's a bit broader than all of that. Next slide. When we communicate with the reviewers about what they're doing, we ask them to look for demonstrated potential for significant achievement in STEM. We ask them to take a comprehensive approach to the review and give balanced consideration to all the bits of the application. So everything from the educational and research record and evidence of leadership or interaction with society, but also plans for the future, experiences, all of that stuff should be considered by the reviewers. Okay, next slide. So when considering intellectual merit, or remember the potential to advance knowledge, reviewers are going to look throughout the entire application. And they're going to look for demonstrated intellectual ability, grades, looking at the transcripts, you know, publications, awards, any presentations given, all of that stuff. But also, you know, what's the evidence that you can plan and conduct research, work as a member of a team or independently, your ability to communicate research and take initiative to persist. And it's always good when, you know, you're describing what you see your plan for your graduate education. Does it seem appropriate for your major field of study? Is it thoughtful? And is it likely to get you the training you need to ultimately advance knowledge in the field? Okay, next slide. Now, the broader impacts, it's a little bit different, and it's up to the applicant, each applicant, to define what this means for themselves. So these are societal benefits. So what you want to do is you want to take a step back, and you want to think about what you're proposing to do in your graduate education, what you intend to study, and you want to think about, you know, what are the societal impacts here? So, and right now we're being joined by a friend of mine who's going to walk across the computer. Okay, come here. Go ahead. There we go. In my defense, if anything that had teeth and claws and weighed that much walked across the computer, I'd treat it just the same. So societal benefits. So it could include increasing participation of the full spectrum of diverse talent in STEM. So would the applicant contribute to that spectrum of diverse talent, or have they done things to help expand that talent in the field? Have they engaged in mentoring, or, you know, gone into schools to improve STEM education, or done anything for scientific literacy of the public? Any sort of outreach, things of that nature. So what are the contributions to society, and what are the potential contributions to society? And again, there's evidence in all parts of the application. But remember, again, you need to explicitly state something about broader impacts and about the intellectual merit in both of the statements, both the personal statement and the research plan. The next slide. Okay, so we're going to tick through some guidelines, some suggestions that we have for applicants. And one of those, which start early. So go back in time to the middle of the summer and start your application. Make sure to read the solicitation thoroughly and understand what it's saying and follow the instructions. Familiarize yourself with the application module. They're in research.gov. Make sure that you get those reference letters in, and so you should have already had discussions with people about writing those letters. And you want to make sure that you not only get that submitted within the portal and they get their request for the letters, but you probably want to follow up with reminders. And just make sure that they understand that this year, that deadline for letters is before the application deadline. Next slide. Okay. Major fields of study, make sure you select the correct one and check the deadline for that major field of study. The major field of study, and this is important to understand, it must match your proposed graduate degree program. Or if you are in a degree program, it's got to match that degree program. You cannot change the major field of study associated with your application after you submit. And if you're offered, you've got to stay in that major field of study for 1 year of graduate study before potentially moving. We do this because the application process, the applications are reviewed by people who are in that field. And so we we're trying to make sure that the applications are aligned with not only the reviewers, but also ultimately the field of study of the applicant. Next slide. Once again, you want those separate headings for broader impacts and intellectual merit in both the research and the personal statements. If you have any concerns about getting some of the formatting right and things of this nature, we do have templates that are in the application module. You can download those and use them. That should help alleviate any worries. And don't assume that if you get applications that were submitted last year or before that, that they are good to go and they're properly formatted, because formatting requirements have changed over time, and you don't want to have your application declared non-compliant because you're using your buddy's application as a template. Next slide. This is really important if obscure. You want your enrollment and degree dates that you list in your application to match what's on your transcripts. And this can cause hangups in a couple of different cases. If you are on a joint bachelor's master's program and you intend to apply from there, just realize that there's a definition that we use for these combined programs. It should be described in your transcripts, and it should show that both the bachelor's and master's degrees were awarded concurrently. So if for whatever reason it does not indicate that and you're applying from one of these programs, you're going to need a letter from the registrar confirming that you are enrolled in a joint program as defined by the university. Okay. Now, for current graduate students, strongly recommended that you submit official transcripts. And this is important. You need to take a look at those transcripts to make sure that you have not completed more than one academic year of graduate study. We go by what's on the transcripts. And if you had a summer start, if you're applying fall of 2024 and you actually had a summer start in your graduate program in 2023, and it shows that on your transcript that you were enrolled in the summer of 2023, you would be considered to have more than 1 year of graduate study. Okay, so just be aware of that. Next slide. Okay, and this is something to keep in mind. It shouldn't occupy too much of your brain space at the moment, but if you apply and you're given an honorable mention, now normally the honorable mention, that would be great. It would go on your CV or your resume, but there's not a lot that goes along with it, except now we've got a new fellowship program that where graduate programs, universities from certain states can apply for funding to award fellowships to those students who have been awarded honorable mentions but are not, funded with a fellowship. So keep this in mind if you end up being awarded an honorable mention, that there may be an opportunity and space in a graduate program that would come with fellowship funding. So anyway, something to think about for the future. Next slide. So, and if you know people who are mentoring you, who you think would be great as reviewers, if they know you, they're not going to review your application, but please go ahead and let them know that there are opportunities to review graduate research fellowship applications. They can go to nsfgrfp.org/reviewers. And there's information there about the review process, what entails, how to submit a form ask to be considered to review, all of that good stuff. And not only is it service to the university, to science, but it also is a great way to learn how to better advise those who are going through the application process. Okay, next slide. So in conclusion, thank you for your attention. If there are questions that you're left with after we end here, we've got some places to check out. There's nsfgrfp.org, and there we have sections for applicants, for reviewers, and also for those who are writing reference letters. And there's good descriptions about what a reference writer should include in the letter, and length, formatting, all that stuff. If you have questions too that are not answered here, I would suggest sending an email to info@nsfgrfp.org. And go ahead, send it in, and the Operations Center will review those and get back to you. Okay, and I think right now we can take some questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Joel and Rochelle, for your presentation. That was very helpful, and I'm going to stop the recording now.